For example,
yes,
ASEAN, how
yes.
can relations be
I think
developed?
we can improve our trade with, especially trade with Asian countries. The Croatian problem in trade relation with some big countries like China, India,
Indonesia,
yes. Our production is in many areas too small. We have very good products, wine, oil, and the other things. But unfortunately, we cannot produce enough for such big markets. Probably you have 26 million, as I remember, of inhabitants. Probably we can cooperate much more than in past. So I think that the Croatian foreign policy should open door for trade in Asia as well.
How do you rate the development in terms of the democratic values?
Democracy in any country is not finished forever.
Are you putting corruptors behind jail?
Bahagianya menang Toyota Yaris dan Mercedes-Benz S-Class dari Gebiar tahapan BCA. Terus tingkatkan saldo Anda.
Hanya BCA.
Flawless White membantu menyamarkan noda hitam, kulit tampak lebih putih bersih hanya dalam 7 hari. Kerut dan kantung mata tak lagi membuatku khawatir. Baru dengan teknologi ganda, Revitalift Double Eye Lift dari L'Oreal Paris. Krimnya menyamarkan kerut dan kantung mata. Gelnya mengencangkan kelopak mata. Ku percaya produk terbaik di dunia. Anda begitu berharga.
Kadang, sebuah hal kecil mampu menghadirkan kehangatan yang begitu berharga.
Aristo, the heart of your home.
Kamboja kaya akan peninggalan Sang Buddha yang keberadaannya hingga kini masih terjaga. Ikuti perjalanan menyusuri jejak Budi Dharma di negeri 1000 pagoda dalam Archipelago, The Beauty of Cambodia, Minggu 30 Mei jam 3 sore.
It seems that Croatia suffers the problems of newly economic democracies, not unlike Indonesia, namely widespread corruption, cronyism, and a general lack of transparency. And these things could hamper economic growth as well as much needed foreign investment. On top of that, the inefficient judicial system and public administration and the presence of organized crimes are problems that the country faces. Croatia has only been independent for what?
About 2 decades.
Yes, about 2 decades. I mean, how do you feel about the progress of the country? Is it in terms of unity?
Unfortunately, we had war, and the war is always bad surrounding for development, for economical development, and for democracy. Our economy is now relatively weak, and we have to strengthen our economy. That's one point. And secondly, concerning democracy, I think our progress is very visible, especially because Croatia from the first day turned out from so-called communist model It was not really communist, but because we were not like some Eastern countries. But it wasn't capitalism, no free market, and political rights were somehow limited. And so we accepted multi-party system here in Croatia, and then we had war, and it was not very good for democracy.
All right, but how do you rate the development in terms of the democratic values? Such
I think
as
it's important.
Civil rights,
Yes,
political rights?
We had problems with civil rights, especially concerning Serb minority here in Croatia because of the war. We were victim of aggression from Serbia, and somehow that was not very good framework for citizens' rights, those citizens from Serbian origins here. And now we have a Serbian party in the government. Our vice prime minister is from Serbian party, and no major obstacles for Serbian rights here in Croatia.
Yes, but in terms of political expressions, for example?
Yeah, it's completely free. You can read any newspaper, you can read articles against the government, against opposition, against president. So I think it's very good.
Would you say that democracy in Croatia has matured, or it still has some ways to go?
Of course, democracy is not, democracy in any country is not finished forever. We have to build democracy, we have to build human rights in all countries. We can find examples even in the oldest democracies that people have some problem with human rights and political expression.
While gains in tourism has helped the country's economy to rebound, however, corruption, together with problems and crimes related to it, is still clearly a challenge, on top of issues such as the global economic downturn, unemployment, and much-needed reforms to get democracy work for its people and revive the business climate. I asked President Josipovic about his plans and strategy to overcome the major problems the country is currently facing. The one thing that you mentioned, which is also your platform in your campaign, is fighting against corruption.
Yes.
Tell me about it. How much of a problem is corruption, and
I think
why?
It's a very important problem, because especially during the war and during the transformation of Croatia from socialist to capitalist country, some very important enterprises and some important national goods were sold, but not always transparent. And that was somehow start or good condition for corruption. And now, unfortunately, Croatia is considered by citizens here and by foreign investors as a relatively corrupted country. And now the fight against corruption is shaped, and I would like to push it even further. That means no one will be accepted from the law and from the rule of the law.
Such as how? How do you plan to implement?
Yeah, it's very important to create a mental state of
the mindset of the...
Yes, minds, yes, and especially to improve laws. And the president is in the position to push it through security services, because he's in charge for security.
Are you putting corruptors behind jail?
Yes, you can read the newspapers every day.
So the forms of corruption, we're talking about high-level corruption, I presume.
Yeah, it's high-level corruption, but unfortunately the corruption started to be a way of living for everything small. If you go to medical, then you have to give some bribe. Then if you go for this or that paper, some bribe again. And we have to cut all this.
And the corruption, for example, between politicians and business people, is this a type of corruption?
It happens, yes. It's a matter of high corruption, probably.
But what do you see as the main obstacles to your efforts or your government's effort to stamp out corruption?
The biggest challenge is to change state of minds. This is a big challenge, because unfortunately big number of our citizens think that this kind of small corruption or high corruption is the only way of performing social relations in Croatia. But we are now trying to change it, and it's going very good. How? To convince them, to show that it's not necessary to give bribe, that we punish those people who accept bribe, and to encourage people to report those cases. And now it's going better and better.
Do you have a specific target of when, for example, corruption will
always. The eye must be on the high level of politics. That means if situation on the top is good, then you can properly perform it on lower levels. But if the top of politicians are corrupted, you cannot be very convincing.
It's not a good signal.
Yes, it's not a good signal.
So organized crime is still a problem.
Yes, because the organized crime is obviously connected with corruption. High level of corruption is always connected with its mode of organized crime.
Okay, and how has corruption affected Croatia's economy?
It's very, very bad for Croatian economy. There is one estimation of World Bank then that organized crime and corruption is taking more than 12 billion kunas yearly.
Which is a lot in terms of
it's 1/10 of our budget, and it's very, very big amount of money, and we have to take this money back and to use it for economy, for social services, and for other important needs of our citizens.
Maybe we are very good in corruption. Maybe best in the world. Like in football.
What sort of problems do you think that the country needs to be fixed?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Pilkada semakin dekat. Saya sadar tidak mudah untuk dipilih menjadi gubernur, tapi saya telah berikhtiar dengan sepenuh hati. Saya lahir dan dibesarkan di Banua. Ibu saya asli Pagatan, ayah saya berdarah Sulawesi. Itulah takdir yang tidak mungkin saya tolak. Tetapi sejak kecil saya tumbuh sebagai orang Banua. Saya menghirup udara Banua dan bergaul dalam lingkungan masyarakat Banua. Saya mencintai provinsi ini. Saya ingin terus mengabdi pada Banua. Karena itu, kalah dan menang bukan soal. Pemenang pilkada harus kita hormati. Siapapun yang menjadi pemimpin, provinsi yang kita cinta ini harus terus berkembang. Semoga Allah bersama kita.
Sudah pasti
Amin.
memilih nomor 5.
Pentas Sendratari Dharma Santi menabur benih kebajikan. Datang dan saksikan tarian kolosal penjabaran kebaikan hidup Sang Budi Dharma. Minggu 30 Mei jam 7 malam di Arena Pekan Raya Kemayoran, Jakarta. Menabur benih kebajikan Waisak 2554. Teknologi digital turut mempercepat lahirnya berbagai karya dari para musisi dan komposer. Akankah inovasi ini menggeser eksistensi para pemusik dan pencipta lagu di masa depan? Musik Digital, Minggu 30 Mei, jam 1:30 siang.
This is Trešnivka market, which is a nice local market in Zagreb where they sell all sorts of things like fruits and vegetables, although most of these produce at the moment are imported because it's winter here. So how is Croatia's economy? Well, the IMF classifies the country as a high-income country, although in the recent global financial crisis, the country is pretty badly hit. For example, unemployment stands at 16%, and a lot of the businesses are finding it hard to get by these days. And this was reflected in the last elections when the voter turnout barely reached 50%. So definitely, the economy is something the Croatian government must really address. Once one of the wealthiest of the Yugoslav republics, Croatia's economy suffered badly during the 1991-95 war as output collapsed and the country missed the early waves and investment in Central and Eastern Europe that followed the fall of the Berlin Wall. Between 2000 and 2007, however, Croatia's economic fortunes began to improve slowly, with moderate but steady GDP growth of between 4% and 6%, led by rebound in tourism and credit-driven consumer spending. Nevertheless, difficult problems still remain, including a stubbornly high unemployment rate, a growing trade deficit and uneven regional development. The state retains a large role in the economy, as privatization efforts often meet stiff public and political resistance. For the moment, however, problems of unemployment and distrust by the people in their government's ability to handle corruption and the economy create an atmosphere of dissatisfaction in the ordinary Croatian who is busy trying to make a living. Here in Trešnjska market, Anna is practically the only vendor who is open enough to talk to me and show some optimism in the country's future. How is business for you? Is business doing well?
It's good. It's good.
What sort of problems do you think that the country needs to be fixed?
Moja zemlja je prelijepa.
Croatia is a beautiful country.
Očito je negdje nastao neki.
Although there are problems caused by the war and by some false decisions made toward our economy.
Zato što je problem nastao u radu.
But I hope one day everything will be fine.
I onda se to malo.
Are you optimistic about the future?
It's very optimistic.
My Croatian friend and guide Draško, however, has not been so lucky to have a job at all. He was a businessman in the past, but then his venture failed. However, for somebody his age, there is few opportunity to start over or to enter the job market, especially when the unemployment rate is around 15% and the country is facing a bleak economic situation, least of all because of the financial crisis that is currently hitting Europe. Fortunately, his wife is successful in her career as a lawyer and they don't have any children to finance. During a home-cooked meal at his house in the suburbs, Draško shares some of his hopes and worries about his beloved country as well as his own future. Do you have faith in the government?
Not too much. In this government, not too much. Maybe if there were some changes on next election, maybe, but this government don't give me any faith. It's getting better, but not so better that we have a proper life.
There's a new president now.
Yeah, there's no president.
There'll be any changes?
I hope. He's a very educated man, very civilized, with a great culture. Because it can't depend on the will of one man. He could play very good piano and be a very good professor, but he's only one man.
What about corruption?
Oh, corruption. Maybe we are very good in corruption. Maybe best in the world. Like in football. Corruption in football is very good in Croatia.
Listening to Draško, I begin to see similarities in both Croatia and Indonesia, especially when it comes to the two countries' problems. Indonesia too is a relatively new democracy who, after almost 65 years of independence, is still striving hard to free herself from the crippling shackles of rampant corruption. And yet for Croatia, entry to the European Union is dependent on reforms made to improve her economy and create a transparent and accountable judicial system, a clean government, and of course, eradicate corruption. So it's a new dream.
Yes,
being a
somehow.
president. Do you think it's a good career move for you?
Real life is something else than in my office.
It's interesting. Do you have a lot of friends on your Facebook account?
Kerut dan kantung mata tak lagi membuatku khawatir. Baru, dengan teknologi ganda, Revitalift Double Eye Lift dari L'Oreal Paris. Krimnya menyamarkan kerut dan kantung mata. Gelnya mengencangkan kelopak mata. Ku percaya produk terbaik di dunia. Anda begitu berharga.
Pentas Sendratari Dharma Santi menabur benih kebajikan. Datang dan saksikan tarian kolosal penjabaran kebaikan hidup Sang Budi Dharma. Minggu 30 Mei jam 7 malam di Arena Pekan Raya Kemayoran, Jakarta. Menabur benih kebajikan Waisak 2554.
Ketika panas datang, kulit kepala pria lebih mudah berketombe dan gatal. Gunakan Clearman Cool Sport. Aktif mentolnya menyegarkan kulit kepala. Perlindungan lebih lama dari ketombe. Kalahkan rasa panas, gatal, dan ketombe dengan Clearman Cool Sport.
Setelah 10 tahun hadir sebagai stasiun televisi berita yang pertama di Indonesia, Metro TV perlu meremajakan dirinya karena memang tantangan yang dihadapi telah berubah.
Oleh sebab itu, Metro TV melakukan perubahan karena ingin kembali membangun relevansinya kepada pasar dan memberikan yang terbaik buat pemirsa. Knowledge to Elevate merupakan penggabungan dua pilar. Pilar idealisme untuk mencerdaskan kehidupan bangsa. Pilar yang satunya merupakan pembangunan dan service excellence bagi para